Bill Schang served the Ripon College English Department from 1969 to 2011, and as Ripon's Dean of Faculty from 2002 to 2006. For excellence in teaching, he won 4 Severy Awards, 4 Senior Class Awards, and an Underkoffler Award. He was instrumental in the Schang Family Visiting Writers Fund and the William Schang Liberal Arts Scholarship. Bill died on October 12, 2015, and a memorial celebration sponsored by the Ripon College English Department was held in his honor on December 6th. Many of Bill's colleagues, friends, and family members attended and testified to his excellence as a teacher, a leader, a colleague, and a friend. The event opened with formal remarks from 4 of Bill's fellow members of the Ripon faculty.
I want to thank, as a friend of Bill's, I want to thank the English Department for sponsoring this program and for allowing a foreigner from the History Department to come in and speak. I assume that I was asked to speak because it was thought that I was one of Bill's closest friends. The fact that Bill and Vance and I went out to lunch for once a week for well over 30 years may possibly actually have risen to the point of being a minor campus legend. However, I don't think it would have ever occurred to Bill to rank order his friends. His friends were his friends. He did some things with some and other things with others. He went to lunch with Vance and I. He went with David and Lee on a trip to the Mississippi. He visited Tom Oyster's cabin on the island several times. He went with Bob Otis with students to watch whales in Washington. And I'm sure many, many other things with many other people that I have not heard of or probably have forgotten. Friends were extremely important to Bill, and he spent quite a bit of time working with friends. One might be tempted to say that he assiduously worked to develop friendships. This would be true, but it would also sound cold and rational, and it wasn't. It was warm and instinctual. Being a good friend was what Bill was all about. And even in the bleak days, when we went to visit him in Sharehaven, and began to see all those wonderful things that we liked about Bill disappearing, even at the end, when he barely had the capacity to speak, he still greeted us with whatever smile he could muster, and a handshake became a close hug. It was as if somehow we reached the very core of Bill and found that very core, that special desire to be a friend and to cherish his friendships. But is this a matter that we should be talking about in a group of professional colleagues? After all, how many CVs out there do you expect we would find an entry? I went out with the same group of guys for lunch in 35 years. But I think it is important. I was very much moved by a letter written by Bob Amston that was published in the Commonwealth Press, and as a tribute to Bill. I hope many of you saw it. He recounted in the letter those grim days when he was dean, when Bill was dean, and the college was facing a highly traumatic situation where it lost nearly 20% of its faculty positions, and in fact, the very survival of the college seemed to be in question. During this time, Bob mentioned, Bill was careful to continually inform the faculty of what was going on. And as Bob intimated in this, Bill didn't do this just because that's what deans are supposed to do. He did it so that he could convey to the faculty members that they were his friends. They were people who meant a great deal to him, and for whom he cared a great deal. And Bob mentioned that this communication, and I think the sense of the feelings behind it, was very important to faculty members and considerably aided in developing faculty morale. But I think there's a lot more to it than just this one instant. In one respect, at least, I think Bill's efforts to make friendship were, in some respect, calculated. Like many of us who came to Ripon, thinking that this was going to be the first stop on a career that was going to lead to many other more prestigious places, Bill came and stayed, as we did. And we came and stayed because we discovered very quickly that this was a very special place. Special in particular because it was not so much an educational institution, it was a community. It was a community in which the members of which are not merely colleagues, but they're friends. We all know each other's academic interests, we know each other's research interests, but we also know each other's families. We know each other's children. Our children play together. Our children even shared hand-me-down clothes together. We even know each other's dogs. And in my opinion, this sense of being a community of friends, is one of Ripon's greatest assets. It gives us confidence and trust in one another and allows us to make our way through very difficult situations with greater ease. It is possibly, I think, because of our community nature, that even after another round of traumatic staff cuts last year, we were able to bounce back with great resiliency and come up with an extraordinarily interesting and imaginative curriculum that in no way suggested everybody was digging into trenches and defending their departments. That, I think, is indicative of the kind of trust and confidence that we have in each other because of being friends. Moreover, not only do we see this, but our students see this. They see that they can have at Ripon a close relationship with a mentor who is also a friend, and that relationship will enhance greatly the quality education that they receive here. That awareness may be one of the reasons why Ripon ranks so high nationally in student satisfaction with relationships with faculty. And I think in that respect, Bill consciously shaped his relationships with other faculty to model this particular sense of friendship and as well as collegiality. And I think in doing that, he was successful. Because I think the reason we're here today is not merely because Bill was our colleague, we're here because he was our friend.
I'm happy to say thanks to the English department, partly because I am considered an emeritus member of that department, although I was only in it for 4 years. In the following 39 years, I did some other stuff. I'll try to give you a couple other wrinkles on Bill. You've heard and will hear more about Bill Schang's excellence as a teacher, a friend, a colleague, and a mainstay at Ripon College. I can testify to all those things. At the beginning of a class session, Bill could bring a bunch of boisterous conversations to an abrupt hush with one word. And that word was sex. Bill and I were both sports fans. Except for the Packers and the Red Hawks, though, we mostly rooted for different teams. When my Philadelphia Phillies finally won their first World Series in 1980, Bill gave me an authentic Del Ennis baseball card from the 1950 World Series when my Phillies lost to the Yankees in 4. We also plastered red Phillies logos all over my office door, where they remained for 20 years, until they faded to pink and looked like worn-out ads for Pepto-Bismol. We were also, oddly enough, business partners. We created 3 different corporations over the years, something neither of us would have done without the other. One of them, by the way, involved a partnership with Lester Schwartz. That's Lester's version of Bill as Hamlet in the back. Stories from our corporate cultures may not measure up to Hewlett and Packard or Ben and Jerry, but they were usually pretty funny, at least in light of the notion that comedy equals tragedy plus time. Bill was the realistic one, and I was the not very realistic one. While we both kept each other in stitches, Bill kept me from falling into ditches, and I think I kept him from the pitfalls of reason and common sense. One of our corporations, Video Age Productions, is still going strong after 31 years. That explains the camera. Over the last year, we were still able to communicate. Bill kept asking me, are we still in business? Are we still in business? If he were here now, I'd reassure him again, yes, Bill, we're still in business. And I would let him know that I'm on a mission to produce some entertaining video to commemorate his life and work. The Bill Schang commemorative video project makes me feel like I'm still working with him, if not in the flesh, then at least in spirit. And as I get a little more decrepit month by month, the spirit becomes more and more important to me. Speaking of the spirit, the flesh, and the passage of time, one of my most cherished memories will always be my wedding to Bev in 1990, amid lots of our Ripon College friends in Great Hall. Bill Schang was not only one of Bev's favorite teachers at the time, he was also our best man. I think the three words that sum up our 45-year friendship best are hardy har har. We were almost always laughing. Even when Bill was sliding into abject forgetfulness, he was usually able to recall something funny we did together 20 or 30 or even 40 years ago. One of the most gratifying messages I've received lately is in a note from Louise after Bill's funeral. This is a quote. You'll recognize this. You and Bill had so much fun and were one of the greatest stand-up comedy teams I've ever been around. For me, that tribute feels like a mashup of a Nobel Prize and an Olympic gold medal. And it's worth remembering that we spent all those years at Ripon College. It's a wonderful tribute to a wonderful campus that such a guy as Bill Schang could live among us, work with us, teach us, keep us from falling into ditches, and keep us laughing. Thanks a lot, Bill.
I first heard his voice on my answering machine calling to ask me to come to Ripon for an on-site interview. And when I talked to him, it was really extraordinary. He was saying, oh, you know, this is a great school. We have wonderful students. He said, it's just a peach of a job, a peach of a job. And as many know, looking for a job is not an easy thing. It's stressful and it destroys you pretty much every day. And hearing Bill talk about Ripon that way just sort of changed everything for me and made me see the landscape in a different way. And when I came here, the landscape changed for me indeed. And I've always been grateful to Bill, and he has always been one of the stars that I steered by at Ripon, one of the people that I looked to and asked advice from and tried to watch and see what he did and try to live out his legacy in my own way.
It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces, some from long ago, some from more recently, out here to honor Bill and remember the man he was. I literally would not be here in more than one way without Bill. He was chair of the English department way back in 1987 when I was hired. And I had the great good fortune to work just down the hall from Bill for 25 years until he retired. But I've been thinking a lot in the recent weeks about how extraordinary Bill was, which we all know, and thinking about what made him so extraordinary. And I keep coming back to one idea, and that is Bill did not seem to think that he was extraordinary. He thought that you were. And you could be a student, you could be an alum coming back 20 years after graduating, and you could definitely be one of his colleagues. He was the most amazing cheerleader for this institution, for his friends, for his colleagues, for the good work that everyone else was doing. And he tended to deflect any praise of himself. And I don't want to give the impression that he was some sort of Pollyanna. I mean, he had very high standards. Anyone who was a student can testify he was not an easy grader, and anyone who was his colleague can testify that he was not an easy man to say no to. But somehow he worked his magic, almost despite me in many cases. And I've been thinking again and again in regard to this of watching Bill teach. As we all know, he was just extraordinary in the classroom. And one class in particular keeps coming back to my mind. He was teaching a poet we both love, Walt Whitman. And in this particular session, he had finished the lesson and had a few minutes to spare. And so he just started reciting, very passionately reciting lines from Whitman that he loved. And he was teaching Song of Myself, the Whitman's great epic. And I remember hearing him read aloud from Whitman, "You also asking me questions, and I hear you. I answer that I cannot answer. You must find out for yourself." And later in that same section, "I am the teacher of athletes. He that by me spreads a wider breast than my own proves the width of my own. He most honors my style, who learns under it to destroy the teacher." And I remember thinking when I heard these words that was as close as I think I ever heard Bill come to talking about his own skills as a teacher and his own aims as a teacher. In characteristic fashion, he didn't do it himself, he let Whitman do it for him. And as he reminded his class that day, Whitman's Song of Myself, you might expect to be a work of great ego. I mean, Song of Myself. But it's not. It turns out to have almost nothing in it about Walter Whitman of Brooklyn, New York. And as he pointed out to his class that day, notice how Whitman starts with the pronoun I. Starts with ego, but he always ends with you. And that seemed to me emblematic of something deep in Bill. So I want to conclude by reading you the famous last lines of Song of Myself that Bill read that day. "I bequeath myself to the dirt to grow from the grass I love. If you want me again, look for me under your boot soles. You will hardly know who I am or what I mean, but I shall be good health to you, nevertheless, and filter and fiber your blood. Failing to fetch me at first, keep encouraged. Missing me one place, search another. I stop somewhere, waiting for you." Thanks for coming.
When I was going to be a student here 14 and a half years ago, I knew three things. I was going to be an English major, I was going to be an education minor, so I was going to teach high school English, and upon a recommendation from my high school English teacher, Bill Schang was going to be my advisor. As fate would have it, he was also my English 110 teacher, and he taught me a lesson that took probably about 10 years for me to really get, but probably one of the most valuable lessons I have learned. So, of course, you read, you write, this is what you do in English, especially 110. And I had peer-reviewed another student's paper, and when we got them back, she had gotten an A and I had gotten a B, and I knew my paper was better than hers. And so I brought it up to him, because that's what you do when you go in an office hours and you're a first year and you don't know any better. And he said, that was her best work, but I know you can do better. And that is why you got a B. And as a first year, I totally didn't get it. But I worked harder, and I did get better. And 4 years later, as I'm grading, as I'm student teaching and grading papers, it occurred to me as I started comparing them to see who deserved the A and who deserved the B, how hard it truly is to know your students and know when they could do better. And so I still didn't get the lesson, but I realized how truly difficult it was, and it was a sort of a flashback to that moment. And turns out I didn't teach. I now work here at the college, and in the summer I supervise college students. And the first couple of summers it's just about keeping your head above the water as you do in any first job. And then all of a sudden, one summer, about probably 5 years ago, we're knee-deep in customer service is what we do. And that's when the value of that lesson truly hit home, because I was trying to figure out how to get the most out of each of my students. And that's when it occurred to me that what I was getting out of some of them was the best they could do, even if it wasn't as good as another one of my students. And that's when I came full circle to Bill's really great lesson. And as we're expecting child number 2, I think the very best thing I can teach our 2 sons is that lesson, that it's about being the best you can be, regardless of anyone else. And so I will thank Bill for that lesson every day.
Thank you, Jen. Showed it.
It's difficult to pick even 100 things to focus on about the way Bill affected, I think, all of us, and certainly the way he affected me. I'll share just a couple of things very quickly. The first is, and I won't go into the details, what was without question the very worst day of my career. When a student and I spent a long time in Bill Schang's office. I lost it. I broke into tears. And Bill didn't make me feel bad about that. In fact, he helped me understand that it was normal, if I cared for my students, to be emotional when something bad was happening to one of them. Bill was a role model in so many ways, and he was such a powerful voice for the faculty and for students. I had a rare opportunity about 10 years ago to witness that. I was a faculty participating observer to the trustees at the time, and Bill was dean. And I wasn't, quite frankly, experienced enough to understand why all of the meetings had been so extraordinarily tense, but they were. Bill not only understood it, but he saw it coming. At the Saturday meeting of the full board, when it was time for the report from the Dean of Faculty, I'll never forget this. It was in this room, and he was sitting lined up with the other VPs along the back wall, and he pulled something out of a folder and closed the folder and simply began to read. And he read, and he read, and he read. And I remember tearing up, and I saw members of the Board of Trustees tear up. And at the end, he said, "Those are some of the things Ripon College students say about their classes and their professors. And it's more important that we remember that than what I had written for my report." Bill's wisdom on every level was profound. And as many of you know, last year, I was in a position of serving as interim dean. And one of my projects was to try to get through Bill's files, which it turns out had been in storage everywhere in the office, including on tabletops and desks, for about a decade. And thank goodness they were. Because in clearing out the files, I was able to read Bill's handwritten notes and to find his wisdom for how he had gotten people like me through the worst day of their lives, and also how he'd led all of us through one of the worst years in the history of the college in the early 2000s. Bill was a friend, he was a colleague, he was a mentor, he was a teacher. Bill was Ripon College, and I'm really glad that I've been able to learn from him.
Out of many things that we could talk about, I would just like to bring up a couple of remembrances of Bill. First of all, just how fabulous he was as our first writing coordinator. When we, many years ago, made a commitment to put more of a direct focus than we already were acknowledging about the extensiveness of writing instruction in our curriculum, and Bill took the lead then as the representative of the whole faculty in coordinating that. Absolutely fabulous, helped so many of us to become even better in our own writing, our own teaching of writing, and that, I'm sure those of us who were involved in it will never forget. He was just absolutely fabulous in that role. On a lighter note, something else that a lot fewer of you probably know about, but I'd like to recall our poker group. I was fortunate enough to be able to join that. We had a monthly poker group for many, many years, and we were pretty consistent on that and pretty devoted to it because it was so much fun. Bill, Seal Doss, Bob Cole, John Teska, Kurt Thompson, Bob Otis, later on Joe Hatcher joined in. I'm probably forgetting someone I shouldn't have, but we rotated the hosting, and so of course Louise and Jeff undoubtedly will remember. Occasionally then we were at your place, and we had to also make sure that Slate was taken good care of, and my dog. But we had so much fun. It was nickel, dime, quarter stuff. You know, nobody got their paychecks completely lost during those events. But on a good night, you could make $20 maybe or something like that. But we more than that, was all the laughing, all the fun. Boy, that was so much fun. And the best laugher of them all, by far, was Bill. Anybody who ever heard him laugh will never forget. And there were plenty of those on those poker nights. Just great.
But I started out under Dave Williams in advancement, and that's where I first took a class. I'd never been to college, and I thought, now's my chance. So for the last 20 years, I've been taking classes working through an AD. And after the first couple classes I took, what course should I take? What area should I take? And someone said, if you haven't taken a course with Bill Schang, you have to take a course with him. So I did, and I was all psyched up. I had gotten A's in my other classes. I was ready to take on Bill Schang. Learned a lot. It wasn't quite the stuff I thought I was going to learn, but learned a lot. He was a great teacher. But he gave me a B. It's the only B I've gotten. So when he became dean and I worked for him, I reminded him frequently that I got a B. And all he would do is give me that crooked little smile, not say a word, just that crooked little smile. His eyes would dance, and he just, like that. That was Bill to me.
Hi, everybody. I'm Peter Hitz. If some of you don't know me, I was class of '82. I was an English and economics major, and Bill referred to me lovingly, I hope, as the only student he's ever had that spanned 30 years, 3 decades. I took Bill back in 1979 and was an English major, so I took him in the 70s. And then after a trial law career, I decided to go back to school and take up teaching. So I was a member of his English portfolio class in 2004, I believe. And so it took me 30 years to get it right. And so actually, I just came this afternoon from grading English papers. I'm an English teacher now at Green Lake High School, largely thanks to Bill. So as Dr. Graham said, I'm probably one of his seeds. And as part of that English course, we had to bring our papers and kind of do a self-evaluation on ourselves. And I, of course, was the only one who brought actual typewritten papers to the course. And one of the great things, as you mentioned, was about having handwritten comments. And as I grade papers now, I'm very important to make sure I include very positive and encouraging things on my students' papers, because that's the stuff that keeps people alive and engaged and positive. And the world needs more of that. So as I remind my students, as long as we learn to write more goodly, we're doing well. Thank you, Bill, for that.
My name is Michelle Whitler, Associate Dean of Faculty and Registrar, and I graduated from Ripon College. I was a math major and I minored in biology, so I never had the privilege to take a class from Bill. But I sure knew a lot of English majors, and they talked endlessly about Bill's great talent. And I've known English majors, of course, that spanned all the way back to 1976 when I graduated. The first time I really got to know Bill, though, was in 1976. My first job after college was to work for the Upward Bound program. And it was during the summer, and Doug Northrup is giggling now. And I was teaching biology to students from the reservation and to African American natives from the reservation, and then African American students from Milwaukee. It was quite a mix. And Bill was teaching English. So we were actually colleagues that summer. And a dear friend of mine, Nancy Doris Truesdell, who's the Dean of Students at Lawrence and was an English major, was also working with us that summer. So then I began to get to know Bill as a colleague. Fast forward, during those grim years when he was dean, I was his assistant dean. And there's a couple things that I think about that time with Bill. One, he's among the best bean counters. He might be an English major, but he's very analytical and had confidence in numbers and knew how and understood numbers and was a bean counter. He also, as during that time where we visited a number of ACM campuses and went to lots of dean's meetings together and had that kind of experience of, oh my gosh, they have fill in the blank. They have another new science building. They added another number of faculty positions, another this, another that. And every time he turned to me and said, Michelle, I'm so proud of our faculty. I can line everything else up and we maybe won't reach. We don't have those facilities. We don't have the endowment. But we stand toe-to-toe with our faculty and we are right there. I came to know, of course, the glow of his sunshine and his leadership personally. I'm thinking about Mauro Sacchi now, and I'm thinking about all kinds of other people who really felt the power of Bill, that he was interested. Somebody else mentioned it, that he was interested in that person's success. And it really, that power to be interested in somebody else's success was one of the great gifts that he gave the college, his students, and so many of us.
Hi, I'm Ken Hill in the theater department here, and I knew Bill in '94 when I came. I was a young teacher, and he and Jack both decided, well, young teacher, we're going to film your teaching, and because you're the head of the state theater thing. And I thought, well, that's nice. And but it was also incredibly supportive to have somebody who is that established take an interest in me. And I think that's the one thing I want to talk about is just his support and his laughter. It goes together because when I had Bill in an audience, it was a wonderful thing. Now, you can have Bob and Robin in an audience and you'll hear the laughter. You can have really big laughs. And you go, okay, they're in the audience. Bill Schang was a laugh starter. He knew where the laughs were, and he'd sit in the back, always in the back, and he'd just go here, and he's little laugh. And I would go and say, thanks, Bill, you cued the audience. They were now able to laugh. And so that kind of support and that kind of laughter is what I remember. Thank you.
I am a colleague and considered myself always a friend of Bill's. But I am mostly here as a messenger today for a friend who cannot be here because she was about her mentor's business. And she has given me this to share with you about Dr. Schang and Bill. I remember the moment in May 1976 when I made the big move from addressing him as Dr. Schang and starting to call him Bill. He insisted that we were now colleagues, and I remember feeling incredibly honored. I was one of that year's senior English majors who had been influenced, impressed, and forever changed by his obvious passion for teaching and learning, and his genuine and unwavering interest in me and my future. I was more fortunate than most. I worked with Dr. Schang as a department assistant. I took almost every course he taught. I conducted research for an early video project he was working on, and we spent hours discussing our shared love of Twain, Crane, and all things American lit. I soaked up his wisdom as he guided me through student teaching at Ripon High School. He became Bill when we worked together for Upward Bound in the summer after my graduation. And although he had been my mentor before we really used that title as much as we do now, that summer he became my friend. I am more fortunate than others because I was able to stay in contact with him for more than 35 years after he became Bill. Bill wrote countless letters of reference for me, and we discussed all of my early career moves. Later I worked at Lawrence University with his son Jeff, and now I work there with his daughter-in-law Karen. And we attended dean's meetings together. And he served as dean of faculty at Ripon, and I was dean of students at Lawrence. Bill was a steady influence during my college years and for most of my career in adult life. I see his twinkly smile and hear his distinctive laugh anytime I think about him, or even hear the name Bill. I'm indeed more fortunate than others. I got to know and love both Dr. Schang and Bill. I am incredibly honored and forever changed. Nancy Doris Truesdell, class of 76.
Hi, my name is Chris Ogle. I work in student life. And what I wanted to share is brief, but I think it speaks volumes about Bill. When I started at Ripon in residence life, first year advisors were assigned by residence hall floors rather than they are now. So I would get together with the RAs at the beginning of the year and we'd try to make assignments. There was never a year where one person wasn't the top pick of RAs that they fought over because of a close relationship he had with his floor. There's that man right up there.
I'm Rich Scalhorn, and I'm another one of those folks that came here on a temporary appointment to stay for 7 years. Bill came the year after I did, and so we were colleagues for 36 years and then friends for another 10, so a long association. And I just wanted to amplify a little bit on one of the things that Bill Woolley mentioned about Bill's devotion to the importance of the faculty and its role in leading the college and setting the academic program. I served on most of the important elected committees over the years, both when Bill was a faculty member and when he was dean, and he constantly was reminding us of what faculty voice had said 10 or 15 years before or 20 years before and what the policy had been. And when he became dean, it was just as important to him that the faculty's integrity and role in setting the academic program be maintained. And instead of, as some administrators are often want to do, try to get around faculty policy, he insisted that we follow it and be attentive to what that was. And so I think that's, as others have said, one of the real legacies that he leaves. And I'm very proud to have been a colleague of Bill's. Thank you.